Hello, people on the internet. I don't talk about anything ever, and it's time for me to talk about something. I am really fired up about the Windows 11 being the only operating system in existence from the Microsoft level. I have a bunch of points that I want to talk about, but I just kind of want to do an overview of everything before I jump into the nitty gritty of everything. I just want to say from the outset, I use Windows 11 daily. I have not experienced a problem with it on my side of things. Okay, I understand a lot of people would have gripes with that, and I do have little microaggressions, you could say, about Windows 11 that I am going to discuss, and like just some personal changes that I would have. I'm going to leave out of the argument. I'm going to try to make the case for the random end user, random Apple user, Samsung buyer, purchaser, phone user, using their laptop, going to college. Normal personal computer use is made genuinely worse by Windows 11 in every conceivable possible way. I also believe that it is leading us down a trajectory of another issue that I have as well. And again, I do want to say I use Windows 11, so I do know that that it is a good OS. I know that it can be a good OS. Is it better than Windows 10? Is it better than any other Windows of all time? Definitely not. It's still good enough, I'm sure, which is why we continue to use it. But I'll get into that as we dive deeper in. So from the whole outset of things, Windows 11 shouldn't exist. We originally came to this platform from Windows 10, which was what we were told was going to be the last operating system. So I'm going to go through what it would be like to install Windows 11 in 2025 without actually knowing, to be honest. I have not reinstalled Windows in a while from scratch. I do a lot of golden images as well, and also Macrium Reflect keeps me out of most of the trouble, as well as there are some new additions into the install process that I also don't like. So let's just jump into it from the top of the install process. The first thing that you have to do now that you can't skip anymore is setting up a Microsoft account. This is the first blatant like poop on the end user. I should not be required to be subject to whatever telemetry data or whatever you want to try to shove into a user agreement and legally take from me, based on what the current legal battlefield looks like. I don't subscribe to that. I don't subscribe to you forcing me onto your account. I don't ever see how that could possibly be a helpful thing. I think that adding more emails to the process is convoluting things, and it is not helpful. I also think that you are just trying to data mine me. So I don't appreciate that. I know that's not how the end user sees stuff because you don't see these things. But how a mechanic could take a look at your tire for 1 second and tell you need new tires, I'm telling you, this MS account is a big deal. And most people are sleeping on this. I don't understand why people don't talk about this at more depth. I don't understand why we aren't shoving this down people's throats. It is an insane thing to require somebody to sign up to a subscription service or to sign up to a newsletter or to sign up to an account to something on the first time use. This is everything that we have now. You have an account for your eBay. You have an account for your Hy-Vee or your grocery store. You've got an account now for Starbucks. You've got an account for your convenience store. You've got points. You got an account on everything. They've got all kinds of user data that they're mining off of you from these accounts. That's just how that works. They make money off of the market research that they develop from getting tons of people all at once. So they're getting tons of valuable information from you. Even if that information wouldn't be valuable to you, it is still valuable. And it is worth money, and they are getting it for free by you signing up to their platform. Which brings me to the next piece. We've barely stumbled in the gate. We already have a bunch of issues with our personal user data and how it's being utilized. And they are immediately going to sell you some AI integration, which undoubtedly every single button that you type into that service is going to be collected and analyzed in order for them to try to build a better product to sell to you. And more shamelessly sell even more bullcrap to you without you ever owning it. So the AI integration is immediate, is there. It has been there since Cortana, and nobody has ever appreciated it because AI has never been utilized for the tool that it is. Genuinely, it is purporting and holding up the tech bubble as it is currently, and its use case is like not at all in the area that people are saying it to be. Anybody who heads a tech demo or goes to like a PAX thing or like goes to like some sort of like, area where they're advertising like about a new technology, if you look at anything that Elon Musk has said versus delivered on, you know that these business people are just feeding you complete bullshit in order to try to sell you on an idea of something that doesn't even actually apply. So I see this as them creating a problem to solve for you. I think we did fine with Google searches before they got mysteriously bad before AI integration. And so I just think that I don't need AI, thank you. It is kind of shoveled and forced into your face and made hard to kind of skip, which I find really deceiving and bad practice because not all of us are as spry as we used to be, and we cannot see as well as we used to, and maybe we're not completely sober or something when we're getting something set up, and all of this arbitration is being built up in order to force you into being like on the legal side of things to not have any stake in your own data by the time things are said and done. So I do have a lot of personal ethical incompatibilities with this strategy. It's just obviously like when you go to install something off the internet and they want to try to give you a toolbar on your Google Chrome, and you say no thanks, but it's like really small and like off color and not in a place that you'd expect. I find any color of that, a small skip button in a non-obvious way to immediately opt out of this feature, I find that to be a deceptive business practice and against my business ethics, and you should too, really, I think. So that's my next thing is the AI integration. It is forced upon you unfairly. It is sold as this like snake oil, and it is snake oil. It is a useful technology that is ultimately going to change the world for the better, in my opinion. But this is not about AI. If you want me to talk about AI, please put something in the comments. Tell me how stupid I am about AI, and then I'll use that to reference to make a really good video about AI and why AI is actually a great tool. But it is not in this case. There are no major companies, whether it's OpenAI, ChatGPT, Grok, whatever, all unethical, all extremely bad applications, and really just kind of like a baby version of the platform with no regulation. That's kind of like horrors beyond our recognition. And again, if we're more comfortable than we are outraged, they really don't do anything to actually change anything or do anything. So I'm just kind of raising the red flag now for you to just kind of be angry and fucking hate it, and to be to the antithesis of that, and to maybe like be so much uncomfortable as to opt out from using the platform entirely if they refuse to unstick it from their work. So that is going to be the end of the AI portion. We move on to the next thing, which is OneDrive. So this is going to be something that they're going to prompt you to set up, just like with the AI integration, with a skip button that's hard to skip. And it's going to basically try to shoehorn in a product immediately for you to purchase before you've even done anything productive on the OS. Which is just, I think, a bad business practice from an ethics standpoint. I don't think you should be selling something to somebody until they know they want it. I think as a salesperson, I was always selling off of honesty because I'm good at creating solutions and products for people that actually work for them. So if you do that, it is very easy to be honest and straightforward about whether or not somebody would want a service or not because you actually want it. So I find this unethical, the way that they push it for you. The same with Office 365. It's a bunch of hullabaloo. Office 365 is a bunch of garbage. We used to have software suites in this country where you would buy a permanent license and it would be locked at that year, and you would get updates through the end of the year if you had a connection to the internet. But back in the day, we had disks, so a lot of these programs just had to be tied up and bugs had to be fixed. Otherwise, you could be viable for your money back. Simple as that. I think that's the way that things should return because, again, this is a tech bubble. So a monthly subscription in order to use Microsoft Word with like good spell check, not a selling point for me. And even like Power BI and some of these more powerful programs that they include in the Office 365 from a prosumer professional standpoint, I still don't really think are good integrations or are worth the money. And I see large corporations and organizations utilize this tool incorrectly, which they could be using a different one for free forever. People are so accustomed and comfortable with the Windows Office platform that they are refusing to stop paying insane amounts of money to Microsoft every month just to utilize their half broken down programs that don't even work that well and aren't better than like Libra. So yeah, please, I would love to make a video on just Office separately, so please comment your hate down below. I would love to hate you right back. So I think that covers the install process. I think the major gripe for a lot of people is the lack of the Microsoft account and going to a local account instead situation. I would just say if you're at a point where you need to be doing all this stuff on an end user, angled platform like Windows, you should be comfortable at using Macrium Reflect or another software that's going to help you build a golden image, and then just build a golden image. And if that's too hard for you, then don't use Windows. Simple as that. Then agree that Windows 11 has got some bad features on the install process. So we go to first boot, which is the first thing that happens after you install everything, after you go through a whole bunch of updates, undoubtedly gigabytes and gigabytes of updates. After you install Windows, even if you get the newest, latest version of Windows seemingly from the install tool that you get off of their website, is probably still outdated or needs to install features or updates for some reason, because we can't have nice things anymore in 2025, I guess. And so after the first boot, I do want to talk about the first thing on my list, which is going to be the feature set of Windows 11. I think that this is going to cause a lot of disturbances because a lot of these features are something that you can't opt out of. And they also add to the complication of the OS, at times run in the background, and just overall take from the efficiency and the effectiveness of the hardware that you have. So whatever, I can get more into that later, but the first thing I want to talk about is when you boot up for the first time and you have elected to go with all the settings that Windows has for you, which is the same sort of approach that the Super Size Me documentary approach was, that if it was sold to you, suggested to you, this is what a normal person who doesn't know anything about anything, not even caring about clicking on this God knows hours long video on Microsoft debacles, they're not going to care about any of this stuff or know about any of this stuff. So if you're just going with what's sold to you, you have taskbar widgets and all kinds of garbage aplenty on that taskbar. And those are going to be built-in programs that are going to utilize your location data and a bunch of other user data, because it's all just a harvest of user data because it's open season. It's the gold rush right now for personal data until some like old bureaucrat gets his like child porn leaked based on that user data or something like that. There's going to have to be something like that where some powerful rich guy who doesn't want to be held accountable for something that he did wrong, obviously, is going to be like personally offended by the way that companies are stealing user data or something like that. Anyways, so taskbar widgets already pre-installed with a bunch of bullcrap that you don't need. You have to go and physically remove those, right click on them. It's just a bit of effort. And you could say that it's nothing to right click and get rid of that. But, when you have 12 things like that, number them on the first boot that you have to take care of, it becomes like you spend 30, 45 minutes getting the device set up, and we haven't even gotten into the visual features that I want to see and like a personalized wallpaper or anything like that. So, and we could go at length. I can make an entire video based on the UI design, first boot, how it should feel for the end user, what my perfect Windows 11 would look like, whatever. Feel free to comment anything that you want as far as a suggestion for a video. I would be happy to elaborate. But to keep things on the surface, we move to the next thing that we notice, which is going to be a search on the taskbar. That is going to utilize AI. It's going to be a quick way to utilize Copilot, utilize their services. and eventually build a structure that involves you paying them monthly to utilize Copilot in a very invasive and like ethically irresponsible way, in my opinion. So I just fucking hate that. I think that is something that is like totally egregious and is like enough for me by itself, the search on the taskbar, to be considered not available, because it'll either search through Copilot and AI, or it'll search through Edge, which brings you to an AI related search, and then also just like their search engine. That doesn't help anybody. I could go back to when Internet Explorer came out and Microsoft was exhibiting anti-competition practices and exhibiting their enormous market share strength and shutting out other smaller companies from contributing to the space. You could also say, well, you could just change the setting. Okay, but this becomes another one of those 25 little things that we have to do. And and don't even get me started on the other stuff. We're going to get to it, I promise you. Okay, so then after we've gotten search on the taskbar, now we've got start menu ads and shovelware, depending on the device, where you bought it from, whether you bought it from Best Buy, whether you bought it from HP, it's a laptop, whatever, or if you got your source directly from Windows. If you're not building a golden image, your start menu is going to be filled with ads, suggested, pinned stuff for you to do a little thing to get rid of, which after 25 of those becomes pretty freaking annoying. So that also brings me to pre-installed third-party shovelware like Candy Crush and stuff like that, and Windows apps through the Windows Store that you need a Microsoft account to even get to. Don't even get me started. That stuff is not cool, man. I do not like other programs coming on my expected operating system. I build the operating system or use the operating system for a specific platform to elect to put my own stuff on there. So when you put the stuff that you are getting paid by somebody to put on there, it makes me think not only are you a sellout with no values, with no moral values, but also I think you don't care about my preferences or what I want as a user, which is a trend that we see exhibited multiple times. And I'll get to how everything ties in at the end too. So after we are through the start menu ads and the third-party installed shovelware from the jump, here comes this AI search results. If you press window and you search through stuff, instead of how it used to be where it would search through the files and stuff on your end, and now it goes through AI, especially if you have already opted in and set it up, which again, that becomes user data that they can mine. And also they can mine all the data that you type on your personal thing if you allow for telemetry data and bug fixes and things like that to be there on a specific election. But still, that data can come out. And if you're a private person or you're doing something that's could be a security concern if that information got out, this obviously is very pertinent information to you. But again, for the most people, who cares, right? And I think that's part of the problem is the complacency from you, the end user, at the end of the day. I don't think you actually consider how important these things are because they don't affect you every day. That's a funny thing that continues to go into effect in this end stage capitalism world that we're living in, I think. But not to spend too much time on it, let's move over to Bing search engine being default and that being sort of like either impossible. I don't know if it's impossible or if you can change it. Doesn't matter. It becomes one of those 25 little things I gotta freaking do if I want to use the search feature, and that's if I press enter by accident after I mistype something when I was searching for something on my computer, if the AI search result is disabled, which also sucks because Bing also tracks that data, and when it's connected to your Microsoft account, they also very obviously are taking as much user data as possible. They're looking at every scroll, every mouse over, everything. How much time you spend on the page, everything. And after Bing, that brings me to Edge being the default browser. That brings me back to Internet Explorer being the default and not allowing for like Google Chrome to be in there. Not that Google Chrome is good, because they're one of the big tech companies that is causing all the problems, in my opinion. But again, Edge default is stupid. I think it is a large arduous process to go into their settings app and wait for it to load up. Then when it loads up, you have to choose a different application after you've already used Edge to install a different thing. And then if you try to uninstall Edge, you can't. You have to disable it as a feature, and that's like registry edit stuff, which is not something that I would recommend to anybody that doesn't know what they're doing. That is a huge liability that could lead you down a path of vulnerability in the case of you just putting some random PowerShell script that you got off the internet onto your computer. So it's just ridiculous. I mean, we shouldn't have to fight this hard to just uninstall bloat, right? I should be able to uninstall the File Explorer application if I want to, you know? Sorry, sue me. Explain to me why I'm wrong down below. I would love to hear it. The next thing is actually going to be a terrible thing that is indefensible. Actually, I would love to hear your totally delusional defenses for the settings and control panel debacle that has been going on since Windows 10. If you don't know, I'm about to explain to you. Back in the day, Windows XP era, golden era, in my opinion, 2098 XP, name a better run. Besides Millennium Edition, which we don't talk about, we had a control panel. And you know what? It was a panel with controls for the system settings, right? It's been like this for years. I understand the nomenclature being confusing with the way that we use computers today. We have a computer in our pocket, and that computer uses a settings app, whether you're on iOS or Android. And Windows Phone, not around anymore, so they don't really have the say-so anymore. So I think the original intention was to make everything into a settings app, but it was never finished by the time that Windows 10 came around to release, because they were busy shoveling in a bunch of crap we didn't need. And then, so when it came out with Windows 10, I was already upset because they didn't finish. They put some things out of Control Panel and put it into settings. And then they kept a bunch of stuff in Control Panel. And then they changed the way that all that navigation took place. And a bunch of ways that we were used to accessing in terms of the UI navigation, like quick sound settings per application, things like that. It was actually made pretty convenient in Windows 10, but Windows 11 is worse and bad. You have to open the entire settings app in order to change each individual application's volume, which is like pretty silly. A lot of the time people will just say, well, just install a third-party application that it allows a pop-up. It allows you to do that. Again, this is one of those 25 little things that nobody should have to do, or a PowerShell script that you have to get off the internet, which is like, again, why would I ever have to do that to run a new version of the most popular operating system of all time? I think the zeitgeist is not realizing just how crazy this little conspiracy or whatever, this little cult has become. Because the expectation with Windows is just crazy. People are just expecting them to be soulless people now, and they're just like, we've normalized this type of like cringe behavior. So that brings me to the next piece of the puzzle after settings and control panel is going to be PowerShell scripts to debloat, and why that's a security concern. So if I was a bad actor and you didn't know what the makeup of the content of a script would be on a PowerShell script, which is a string of code, a huge paragraph of code stuff that tells Windows directly in PowerShell, which is like this admin program that does computer stuff directly by code. So you put the code and put it in there, and you press enter, and it does what the code says. And if you don't know what the code says, the code could have something like, and also send all of their photos data to me at hacker@gmail.com. And if you don't know how to look for that, and if you don't know what that looks like, you've just got. And so I think when we as a community that use the platform resolve to a script to fix the operating system in a way that becomes very easy and usable and normal for most people, this is the entire issue with Linux that people have had for years, is that it's all this setup and it's all this, you have to do a script and follow this tutorial. Actually, it's about even now. I would say it's about even now. There is no difference in between setting up Linux and setting up Windows. In fact, I find Windows to be a lot harder to set up because it's hard to even get through to the initial boot process without signing up for a Microsoft account with a bunch of AI features and a bunch of bloat before you even get to a PowerShell script, unless you know a thing or two, or again, you set up golden images, and again, why are you talking to me about this? You already know. So, yeah. I mean, like, I think just as a whole, Windows 11 has a lot of problems. I think that this is ultimately their own downfall because they have become complacent due to the massive market share that they've continued to hold arbitrarily, feels like to me, because nobody else is really trying to edge into the space at all except for Linux, and these are independent developers that are making essentially indie operating systems that have less bloat and have more what people want. I think people take comfort in the fact that it is a major OS. So, you know, I understand that people are like expecting, you know, this to just be something that they usually use. And I do genuinely abide by the belief that in every use case, there is an application that is specific for that use case, and that could involve Windows 11. And I'm not trying to make an argument against that, but I am trying to say that I would say most people using Windows 11 think they need it and they don't, and they argue on behalf of Windows 11 and think it's a good operating system when it's definitely not. So my entire argument is that Windows 11 is the worst Windows operating system of all time. You know, terrible launches aside, I think all these features are on the same, are attacking what was already an established dominant, usable, reliable platform that has destabilized over time and become something that is overly bloated and isn't utilizing everything that it should properly. So I think that they obviously did not do this in some sort of oversight. The more money that goes into these development projects, the more it becomes clear that this is an intentional move to group people into their services that they want to offer to people and make more money off of. It's not that hard to see, but for some reason people like defending large companies and act like they have no choice. They have no choice actually but to make money and make more money by 15% like clockwork. Otherwise, their investors are going to leave. So actually they have more overhead than most people like Linux developers, and they have to make more money like a shark. Otherwise, they will actually flounder and die. And then also they have to make even more money than they made last year. Otherwise, they will flounder and die. So I see this as a golden opportunity for insane amounts of greedflation to be injected. So, you know what I mean? I just feel like it's pretty obvious to see where the all the money is going and where their incentive is. And so after so many years of that very obvious incentive, we do see a very watered down version of what used to be a very good OS, which again, I still think we're hanging on to some sort of screwed up Darth Vader version of Windows 7 essentially. I mean, even Windows 8.1 was just Windows 7 with a slightly different idea, and it was actually not even a bad idea. It just wasn't very compatible because it was something new, and then Windows didn't polish it until it was actually usable and good. And they had a pretty good I think they've been good with accessibility features, and there are times when they have shown that their availability to make good gestures and controls are much better than most companies. And they actually do spend more time on accessibility than most other companies, so the user experience, in my opinion, should just be superior in all ways, especially when you accommodate accessibility into the mix. So I don't see any argument for why Windows should be bad. Also, at the same time, as understanding that all of these features that they're adding are not even really an argument, and the slight features that they are adding are so minuscule, numerous, and don't affect most people. So, it's not even worth mentioning. They've already pretty much gotten most of the way there. So every increment is not going to be 15% better than the one that came before it like they need to do. So ultimately, they are unable to do things, so they must make money elsewhere. So that being said, only under dominance does complacency exist. We move on to the next section, which is the upgrading experience. So when Windows 7 originally came, or Windows 10, fudge. Windows 11 originally came out, there was a TPM 2.0 requirement, which was a physical chip on the motherboard of a device, which means that your physical hardware had to be upgraded in order for you to utilize this TPM 2.0 requirement. This brings me to when the end users strike back and they actually make choices that make the larger companies actually squirm, and then they go back on those things, and it comes with TPM 2.0. As much as we like to pretend that, like, if we all switch to Linux tomorrow, anti-cheat would be solved at the end of the week, I think that would be the case. So gamers who want Linux, why are you on Windows? Please let me know. I think you're not not wanting to play Valorant for more than 6 hours is the reason why we don't have nice things. And so, again, I think your complacency is bringing us all back. So please argue that in the comments. TPM 2.0 is very representative of that. We just weren't gonna, and we weren't gonna upgrade to Windows 11, and we were gonna stay on 10. We were gonna say screw Windows 11, and Microsoft's fear, because they have genetic trauma from Millennium Edition, Vista, other 95 had like that 32-bit issue. There's 16 to 32-bit transition was difficult for Windows in 95. Anyways, so there's a lot of generational trauma that comes from the TPM 2.0 debacle. So again, I mean, think about the amount of power you actually hold in your hands, and you're just volunteering user data and crappy features just be installed on what should be the people's operating system, elected of capitalism, which is supposedly a better system than other systems. Anyways, not getting into that too much. The current resource requirement does increase no matter what whenever you add features. So when you have features on an operating system that don't become a la carte, the 80-year-old woman's PC that you are trying to upgrade is all of a sudden not going to work, and you're not going to know why. And you've been assured over the internet that TPM 2.0 wouldn't be an issue, and for some reason it's still not compatible. And now you have to try to explain to the lady why features are not a la carte and why you can't upgrade to Windows 11. I think that's just ridiculous. I think features not being a la carte is a total miss. Total miss. I think if you have people that are engaged and interested in using AI, that is the way you should be modeling AI. You should not be forcing people to use AI and let grumpy people decide what features are going to be. They're not going to make a good system. Just to be real. So you got to think about where your priorities are, and Microsoft priorities are not on the navigation of UI, not on older end users that have been using this OS for more than 20 years, and they know where control panel is, and they know how to get to my features, and they know how to get to the storage management system, they know how to format drives and everything based on this whole feature set that was already existing on Windows for a really, really long time. And I can understand the need for a transition, but when you deliver a product that's half done, literally with settings and control panel, argue me, please, Microsoft developers, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong there. If you don't have a fully featured operating system and you have a structural control panel holding up the entire way to Windows, like the structural PNG from TF2, I don't think you have a good OS. I don't think you have a fully featured, polished system to transition people into a different use. And I think now, damned if you do, damned if you don't, you have to continue with this system, because now Windows 10 people and younger people that have been using only Windows 10 and 11 for their entire life have become accustomed to the settings and control panel thing. And now look what you've done. Look what you've done, Microsoft. It's bad. It's bad. So you're leaving out older end users. The navigation and UI ethos has completely shifted into something else. I think navigation and UI should deal with redundancy. So if you wanted to add a bunch of stuff in to settings and you wanted people to navigate there instead, on Windows 10, you should have completed it and made it completely redundant to control panel. Essentially executing the same bits of code and operating the same programs as if you were working in control panel, and then leave control panel in there. And then simply be like, everything's in settings. Actually do the damn thing. Okay? And then when Windows 11 came around, we phase out control panel. That would be the right way to do it. Use control panel like a booster rocket to get us into settings, and then get rid of control panel when everybody's already gotten used to this. And this is pretty much the same. It's just different. The new UI design, whatever. And so, like, again, when navigation and UI clash, is when I have an issue, because is it UI design or is it UI slop? I would say it's UI slop. You don't need to force your different looking operating system on me, because I know you haven't done anything different than before. And I know that without a major restructure, you're not able to change the way that things look. And I know that you can wow us by pretending like that's the case, but all these years later, I'm no longer fooled, and I now think that you're either lazy or you can't do it, which I don't know which one is worse. So I think either the ethos of navigation has completely eroded at Microsoft, or they're just so far down shit creek that they can't turn around and pick one way or another. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, but definitely a coffin of your own design, Microsoft. Really weird way to do business there. And now I get to the weird science portion of upgrading here, which is going to be the thing that I talk about at as brief as possible. I've worked in a lot of large organizations as a professional for break fix, heading out to hardware refresh, physically doing the computer refreshes, working with clients, making sure that their driver-related devices still work, which is a good argument for staying in the Windows environment, by the way, and things like that. There's always weird errors, whether it's from Windows 7 to Windows 10 or 8 to 10 or 8 to 11 or 7 to 11 or 10 to 11. It doesn't matter. Whenever you're making a change in the physical operating system, you run into an issue where some things don't work. I had an issue where there were a lot of these doctors I was setting up new machines for, and they use these dictation devices that are a third-party device, of which a company no longer supports, but we have the driver on disk, and we have been able to support it very successfully for years based on solving a bunch of problems. And then when we installed Windows 11, we had all these issues adapting that program that utilized the dictation machine to work with the Windows 11 system, and with no way to contact the original manufacturer, and no open source program, and also no way to regress back into Windows 10 without doing, let's say a $30,000, $40,000 bath on the structure of the network and making a lot of changes on the way that you would have to use the device in order to make sure things were safe. That would deter from the actual functionality of the device, which is against the entire use case scenario. Like if it again, I believe if it's a good application, you should use it. You should not be dedicated to any brand. So I'm not coming at you like I use Windows 11 every day. I'm not coming at you from this like pro Linux life. I'm not coming at you because I work at Linux Incorporated. I'm not coming at you because I'm trying to sell you Linux and I make 10% off every single sold piece of Linux. I'm coming at you from the perspective of Linux does things better in all these different ways, and you have a sunk cost fallacy on Windows because you've been using it for so long, and it's because it's already the most popular thing. And the cultural zeitgeist enables us to use all this crappy tech that's totally worthless because that's just how it is. So all these weird errors occur all the time from an updated Windows, and really the only reason that Microsoft doesn't want to continue supporting a specific OS is because a large feature change would allow them to enable more income or change their model to something that they wanted to adapt for the rest of the, rest of their lifetime, or the operating system's lifetime. Now, I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that an operating system and its version number are going to be able to stay the same forever without exploits. This always happens. So, there is a reason to upgrade to a Windows 11 or a 12 eventually. There's obviously a good use case. But this is not it. What Windows has created in replacement for Windows 10 is not it. And I think it's harder to see because we've become conditioned to garbage. And I think, there are a lot of things like, as a long-term user, you just are used to the navigation and the changes aren't that bad, and you've been using it for a long time, and all your programs work, Adobe works, all that stuff, and you use Adobe. So again, like I said, if it's a good use case, if the shoe fits, that's great. But I also feel like people get too comfortable. in the environment. You are more comfortable than letting go of your product suite that is only used on Windows. You are too comfortable to abandon Windows because all your games work fine. You're too comfortable because even the way that you approach problem solving on a different platform would look different, and you've become comfortable to the way that problems are being solved on the device when you are getting to a certain point of frustration. So I think the way that the approach is different can seem scary and overwhelming, especially when people say Linux. You have this immediate, and I think pointedly, you have this immediate reaction that kind of is around, oh, this is for a more educated user. This is not designed for me. You got to know how to use the terminal, like the Matrix. And there's no real place for anybody that doesn't know what they're doing. But I would say now, even more than ever, Linux does not require a lot of setup comparatively to Windows 11 anymore. And if you're not utilizing a product suite that is only in Windows 11, I would say, why the hell are you even using Windows 11? Because it's a garbage OS, and it's the worst OS that Microsoft has ever made. If you're a gamer and you are using anti-cheat and you're like, my favorite game uses anti-cheat, put the game down for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, stay on Linux, continue gaming on Proton through Steam or whatever. And then make them switch. If everybody switches today, they'll switch. They'll adapt. Easy Anti-Cheat will be on Linux by the end of the week. Absolutely. It's not going to be hard to utilize, to adapt to. You know, yeah, sure, there's going to be hiccups as there is in any transition process, as there would be from Windows 11 to 12. So, basically, you just have to ask yourself, are you comfortable with the current state of the operating system? And if you don't have a lot of problems, obviously, you're not going to identify very well with this, and you're going to point out the positives of the platform that you're using. But I come across all these problems that I can't simply ignore anymore. And just because you're part of the 1% that isn't affected by this particular problem, or you are the 1% that is affected, doesn't necessarily make you even right or wrong. It's just that over time, I've collected more and more things about the Microsoft operating system that have become an issue that I have to talk about. Because, I can't ethically, honestly ask anybody upgrade to that, especially with Windows 10 out of the picture. There's no long-term support package. There's no expectation for long-term support. And there seems to be this trend of continually tacking on features until your current piece of hardware has to be replaced every 2 to 3 years, which, it should really only be replaced every 5 to 7. We have extremely capable pieces of hardware, and just because we want to stick an AI chip in anything that has an LED light does not mean that we should upgrade an operating system. And you're letting marketing and, propaganda get to you, and you're not, honestly thinking, I need to be more ethical about my computer use, and I need to be, giving myself a question, do I need to upgrade my devices? So then the next thing I want to talk about is versus Linux in 2025. I've already talked about anti-cheat. A lot of the reason why you wouldn't have a product suite that would be allowable in Linux is because it does not abide by the open source requirement that Linux requires for all of its software that is in its own prepackaged store or repository, they call it. So if you're not in the repository, you're basically not in the phone book, and these big companies don't like that, but Linux is rigid. You have to have an open source program so that we can try to figure these things out, and also so, you can't be shoveling in a bunch of, features that mine people's data without people finding them, and some dude who knows how to code making an article on BuzzFeed about how, there's this one thing that tracks every single time that your eyes are looking at the screen on a piece of data that was never known about because it wasn't open source before, but now it is, and now we have a big problem with it. So I think the way that things are structured is to make you not pay attention, to make you comfortable, and to make you be okay with just handling over tons of unreplaceable user data that should never have been mined in the first place, to be building large language models all the way down to selling you grapes for $4 more a pound whenever you try to go get some. So, in so many ways, is Linux okay enough, and you should care about open source, so we should adopt this as like a real platform, because genuinely, if we ignore the open source problem, our user data is actually not going to be our own, and your privacy will not be your own. And by the time we realize it, I fear it's going to be too late, and it all kind of starts with Microsoft. If we just let Microsoft do this, if we don't fight back with our attention, if we don't fight back with our intentions, and if we don't fight back with our installs and use case, we will never overcome this Windows problem. We will never overcome this shovelware, bloatware trend that we continue to see on Android and Apple and everything. And we'll see it on Linux too if we don't do anything about it. So don't buy Samsung, don't buy AppleCare, don't buy Apple, don't buy Surface laptops, don't buy Microsoft products, don't install Windows. Uninstall Windows, download Linux, supports open source, look for third-party applications that are competitive with others, make sure those are open source, beg your overlords in the tech industry to go open source, or rather vote with your wallets that you are not going to use anything unless it is open source. And then we can start to really change the tide. But until we do that, Windows is going to continue to be more and more garbage, and people like me are going to continue to get up here and get angry about it, and nobody's going to care unless you are willing to become uncomfortable for a year or more to be adjusting to an operating system that actually works for you. And genuinely, I can't even stress it enough, there are so many reasons and ways that Linux Mint and Ubuntu Desktop and KDE Neon or Kubuntu are just like loads better than Microsoft for general purpose. You have an old aunt, okay, that has got a Windows 10 or 7 computer or Vista or XP, God forbid, and they're looking for something to go on it, throw Linux on it and teach them how to use Linux and teach them how to get to their email. And guess what? They're probably not going to get a virus, and it's probably going to be pretty reliable. And even though some people says it won't automatically update, there's an easy way with GUI to get people to update stuff or to set things up to automatically update or to restart on schedule. There are so many ways to configure the platform of Linux that you can make it do whatever you want, which is why on the back end of things, people only use Linux Server. I mean, like, it really is just way more capable. It's why WSL Linux is on professional versions of Windows now, because Windows realizes that unless they adapt, they are going to be completely made to be obsolete. So that's my argument. I don't even really want anybody to have Linux. If there was another Linux-like category that we could utilize, I would suggest that. But we don't. So instead, we are forced to use this crappy operating system. Okay, bye.